The company holiday party was supposed to be our night. Vanessa had spent 2 hours getting ready, curling her auburn hair into perfect waves, slipping into that black dress that hugged her curves just right. She looked stunning, like the woman I fell in love with 18 years ago. But the moment we walked into the Fairview Country Club's decorated ballroom, she gravitated toward the bar where David Russo stood laughing with a group of her insurance office colleagues. I'm Jack Mallory, 44 years old, owner of Mallory's Auto and Tire on the south side of town. My hands are permanently stained with motor oil, and I smell like brake fluid more often than cologne. Vanessa works at Hartwell Insurance downtown, where everything is glass and chrome and people wear suits that cost more than I make in a week. We used to joke about being opposites attracting. Tonight, it felt more like oil and water refusing to mix. "Jack, come meet everyone," Vanessa called, but her eyes were already locked on David. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, clean, expensive suit, perfect teeth. The kind of guy who'd never worked with his hands a day in his life. I grabbed a beer from the bar and watched as the evening unfolded exactly as I'd feared it would. Vanessa laughed too loud at David's jokes, touched his arm when she talked, leaned in close when he whispered something in her ear. When the DJ started playing slow songs around 9 o'clock, I knew what was coming. "David, dance with me," she said, not asking, demanding. She didn't even glance my way. I watched from my spot at the bar as my wife pulled another man onto the dance floor. His hands found her waist immediately, fingers splayed across the small of her back. Her arms went around his neck, and they swayed together like they'd done this 1,000 times before. The space between them disappeared as they pressed closer, her body molding against his. She threw her head back and laughed at something he whispered, then ground her hips slightly against him in a way that made my stomach turn. That's when I remembered the wedding ring. She'd left it on the bathroom counter that morning, claimed she forgot to put it back on after her shower. "Just an accident," she'd said when I pointed it out. I'd picked it up, slipped it into my pocket, thinking I'd give it back to her at the party. Now I understood why she'd really left it behind. I stood up slowly, walked to our table where her purse sat next to an empty wine glass. The ring felt heavy in my palm as I pulled it out, the small diamond catching the light from the chandeliers overhead. I placed it carefully in the center of her chair, right where she'd see it when she came back, if she came back. Then I turned and walked across the room to where Lisa Chen sat alone at a corner table, nursing a martini and watching the dance floor with an expression I couldn't quite read. Lisa was Vanessa's best friend, had been since college. She owned a vintage clothing store downtown called Timeless Threads, and tonight she looked like she'd stepped out of a 1940s movie in her red dress and victory rolls. She was beautiful in a classic way that Vanessa had always envied, though she'd never admit it. "Want to dance?" I asked. Lisa's green eyes widened in surprise. "I'd love to," she said, taking my offered hand. We walked onto the dance floor together, and I was struck by how naturally she moved, how perfectly she fit in my arms. We talked and laughed as we swayed to the music, and for the first time all evening, I felt like myself again. Lisa was intelligent, funny, easy to be with. Everything felt effortless. "You know," she said softly, "you deserve better than being ignored at your own wife's company party." "Yeah, well," I replied. Apparently I'm not exciting enough for the insurance crowd. "Their loss?" she said, and the way she looked at me made something shift in my chest. We were halfway through our second dance when Vanessa finally noticed. I saw her head turn during a spin with David, saw her eyes scan the room until they landed on our empty table. She spotted the ring immediately, and her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, then something like panic as she searched the crowd for me. When she finally saw me dancing with Lisa, her expression changed to pure shock. She stopped moving entirely, leaving David standing awkwardly in the middle of the dance floor as she stormed toward us. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. And I kept dancing with Lisa, not missing a beat. "Dancing. Like you were." "That's different," Vanessa snapped. "How?" I asked, genuinely curious. "David's just a friend," she stammered, but her face was flushed and her lipstick was smudged. Lisa laughed, a sound like silver bells. "So am I. Just a friend." Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger. "Stay out of this, Lisa." "You brought me into this when you abandoned your husband for the evening," Lisa replied calmly. By now, people were starting to notice the commotion. Vanessa's co-workers were whispering behind their hands, and I could see David hovering nearby, unsure whether to approach or flee. "Why is my ring on the chair?" Vanessa asked, her voice smaller now. "You left it on the bathroom counter this morning," I said. "Thought you might want it back, but you seemed busy." "I forgot it accidentally," she said, but we both knew it was a lie. Did you forget you were married too? I gestured toward David, who was now pretending to study his phone. We were just dancing, Vanessa said defensively. So are we, Lisa pointed out. I thought you were my friend, Vanessa said to Lisa, her voice breaking slightly. Friends don't watch friends treat their husbands like garbage, Lisa replied without hesitation. David finally worked up the courage to approach. Everything okay here? He asked, like he wasn't the cause of the entire scene. I looked at him for a long moment, this man who'd been grinding against my wife 5 minutes earlier. She's all yours, I said finally, and started to walk away with Lisa. Vanessa grabbed my arm. Don't you dare. I removed her hand gently but firmly. You were grinding on him 5 minutes ago, Vanessa, in front of everyone. Her face went red as she realized how many people were watching us. I put your ring on the chair because you don't want to wear it, I said quietly. Your actions tonight proved that. That's not true, she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. Actions matter more than words, I continued, then looked at Lisa. She's been honest about her feelings all evening. Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. What feelings? Lisa squeezed my hand. I've liked him for months, Vanessa. Watched you ignore him, take him for granted, treat him like he's invisible. You're leaving me for her? Vanessa whispered. You left me the moment you forgot that ring and pulled another man onto the dance floor, I corrected. I'm just making it official. Don't do this here, Vanessa begged, looking around at the crowd of onlookers. You did this here, I said, gesturing toward the dance floor where David still stood like a deer in headlights. Lisa tugged gently on my hand. He deserves someone who remembers she's married, she said to Vanessa, then looked at me. Ready to go? We walked toward the exit together, Vanessa's voice following us as she pleaded for me to wait, to talk, to give her another chance. I didn't turn around. Behind us, she was left standing in the middle of the ballroom with her wedding ring clutched in her hand, the entire insurance office watching her humiliation unfold. The cold December air hit us as we stepped outside, and Lisa shivered slightly in her thin dress. I took off my jacket and draped it around her shoulders. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest, she said, but she was smiling. Probably both, I admitted. But I'm tired of being invisible in my own marriage. You were never invisible to me, Lisa said softly. As we walked to my truck, I could see Vanessa through the ballroom windows, still standing where we'd left her, David nowhere to be seen. She'd turned and seen me place the ring on her chair, then watched me walk straight to her gorgeous friend. Now she knew how it felt to be abandoned. The drive to Lisa's apartment was quiet, both of us processing what had just happened. I'd blown up my marriage in front of half of Fairview Mills' professional class, and somehow I felt lighter than I had in years. What happens now? Lisa asked as I pulled into her driveway. I honestly don't know, I said. But for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to finding out. She leaned over and kissed my cheek before getting out of the truck. Thank you for the dance, Jack Mallory. I watched her walk to her door, my jacket still around her shoulders, and realized that sometimes the end of one thing is just the beginning of something better. I woke up Saturday morning in my own bed, alone, staring at the ceiling and wondering if the previous night had been some kind of fever dream, but the silence in the house confirmed it was real. Vanessa hadn't come home. Our daughter Emma was away at college, finishing her senior year at UMass, so the house felt especially empty as I made coffee and tried to process what I'd done. 18 years of marriage, ended on a dance floor in front of half the town. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with text messages I wasn't ready to read. The first one was from my best friend Eddie Travers, who owned the Green Lantern, the Irish bar where I spent most of my Friday nights when Vanessa was working late, which I was starting to realize she'd been doing a lot more often lately. Heard about last night. You okay? Come by the bar later. The next few were from various acquaintances around town. Word travels fast in a place like Fairview Mills. But it was the one from Vanessa that made my stomach clench. Jack, we need to talk. I'm staying at my sister's. What you did last night was humiliating and cruel. I made a mistake, but you made it worse. Call me. A mistake. That's what she was calling it. Grinding against another man at a company party while her husband watched wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice that told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in her priorities. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Vanessa's sister Carol standing on my front porch, arms crossed, wearing the same expression she'd worn when she disapproved of me marrying her sister in the first place. Carol Brennan was everything Vanessa aspired to be. Successful, sophisticated, married to a lawyer, living in a colonial house on the good side of town. She'd never liked me, thought Vanessa was settling when she married a mechanic instead of holding out for a professional. "Jack," she said when I opened the door, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to talk." "Morning to you too, Carol. Coffee?" "This isn't a social call." She pushed past me into the living room, looking around like she was cataloging everything for a divorce settlement. "What you did to my sister last night was unconscionable." I sat down in my recliner, the one Vanessa had been trying to get me to replace for 3 years. "What I did? I danced with a friend. You humiliated her in front of her entire office. Do you have any idea what this could do to her career?" Maybe she should have thought about that before she decided to dry hump her coworker on the dance floor. Carol's face went red. "It was just dancing, Jack. You're being dramatic." If that was just dancing, then what Lisa and I did was just dancing too. But somehow I don't think Vanessa sees it that way. "Lisa Chen has been after you for years," Carol snapped. "Everyone knows it. She's been waiting for an opportunity like this." That caught me off guard. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, please, Jack. You can't be that oblivious. The way she looks at you, the way she finds excuses to come around when Vanessa's not here. She's been trying to break up your marriage for years." I thought about Lisa, about all the times she'd stopped by the shop when she needed her car worked on, the way she always seemed interested in what I was doing, asked about my day. I'd chalked it up to friendliness, but maybe Carol was right. Maybe there had been something more. "Even if that's true," I said, "it doesn't excuse what Vanessa did." "She made a mistake," Carol said, echoing her sister's text. "She was drunk, she was having fun at a party. It didn't mean anything. It meant something to me." Carol studied me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how to play this. "Vanessa loves you, Jack. She's been under a lot of stress at work lately, and maybe she's been distant, but that doesn't mean she doesn't care about you. She left her wedding ring on the bathroom counter, Carol, on purpose. She forgot." "Bullshit." The word came out harder than I intended. She knew exactly what she was doing, and so did I when I put it on her chair for everyone to see. Carol's expression shifted, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she looked uncertain. "What do you want, Jack? An apology? She's sorry. She knows she screwed up." "I want a wife who acts like she's married to me, not like I'm some obligation she has to tolerate." "So, you're just going to throw away 18 years over one dance?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where we'd lived for the past decade. Nice houses, good people, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. By now, the whole street probably knew about last night. It wasn't one dance, Carol. It was months of working late, years of growing apart, 1,000 little moments where she chose something else over me. Last night was just the first time she did it in public. When I turned around, Carol was staring at her phone. "She wants to come home, Jack, to talk. Tell her the locks are changed." It was a lie. I hadn't changed anything yet. But I wanted Carol to understand that this wasn't something that could be fixed with a conversation and a few tears. "You're making a mistake," Carol said, heading for the door. "Vanessa is a good woman, and you're throwing her away for some fantasy with Lisa Chen." "Maybe," I said, "but it's my mistake to make." After Carol left, I sat in the quiet house and tried to figure out what came next. My phone rang, and I was surprised to see Lisa's name on the screen. "Good morning," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "How are you feeling today?" "Like I just blew up my life in front of half the town." "Any regrets?" I thought about it for a moment. "Surprisingly, no. You?" "Only that it took so long for you to ask me to dance." There was something in her voice, a warmth that I hadn't heard from Vanessa in years. "Carol just left. She seems to think you've been plotting to break up my marriage." Lisa was quiet for a moment. Would it matter if I had been? The honesty in her question caught me off guard. "I don't know. Maybe not. I care about you, Jack. I have for a long time, but I never would have acted on it if Vanessa hadn't pushed you away first. And now? Now I think you deserve to be with someone who appreciates what she has." We talked for another 20 minutes, and by the time I hung up, I felt more alive than I had in months. Whatever happened next, at least I wouldn't be invisible anymore. The rest of Saturday passed quietly. I worked on a carburetor in the garage, tried to keep my hands busy while my mind processed everything that had changed. Around 6, I drove to the Green Lantern to find Eddie and tell him my side of the story before the town gossip got too far ahead of the truth. The bar was busier than usual for a Saturday evening, and I could feel eyes on me as I walked in. Eddie was behind the bar, polishing glasses with the same methodical precision he'd used when he trained me to box 20 years ago. "Well, well," he said when he saw me. If it isn't Fairview Mills' newest celebrity. That bad, huh? Depends on who you ask. Half the town thinks you're a bastard for humiliating your wife in public. The other half thinks she had it coming. He poured me a beer without being asked. What do you think? I think I'm tired of being married to someone who acts like she's single. Eddie nodded slowly. He'd been divorced twice, knew something about marriages that fell apart. So what's the plan? I honestly don't know. For the first time in years, I don't have a plan. That's not necessarily a bad thing, Eddie said. Sometimes you've got to tear something down before you can build something better. As if summoned by our conversation, the door opened and David Russo walked in with two other guys I recognized from Vanessa's office. The conversation in the bar didn't exactly stop, but it got quieter, and I could feel the tension ratchet up a few notches. David saw me immediately and said something to his friends. They found a table across the room, but I could feel them watching me, probably trying to decide if I was the kind of guy who'd start a fight in a public place. This should be interesting, Eddie muttered. I took a long drink of my beer and tried to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. The old Jack would have ignored them, finished his drink, and gone home. But the old Jack had also watched his wife grind against another man without saying a word until it was too late. Hey, Eddie, I called out, loud enough for the whole bar to hear. You remember David Russo, don't you? He was a few years behind us in high school, star of the debate team, I think. Eddie caught on immediately. Oh yeah, David, I remember him. Didn't he used to date, what's her name, the girl who ended up marrying that accountant from Springfield? That's the one. Funny how some guys never learn to keep their hands to themselves. David's face went red, and one of his friends put a restraining hand on his arm. But David shook him off and walked over to the bar. You got something to say to me, Jack? I turned to face him fully, noting that he was taller than me but soft around the middle, the kind of guy who'd never been in a real fight in his life. Just making conversation, David. How's the Audi business treating you? Fine, he said warily. Good, good. I imagine you're pretty busy this time of year. A lot of people looking to trade in their old models for something newer, more exciting. The implication hung in the air between us, and I could see David struggling to decide whether to take the bait. Around us, the bar had gone completely quiet. Look, David said finally, what happened last night, I interrupted, is that you danced with my wife like you were trying to get her pregnant on the dance floor, in front of her entire office. She asked me to dance, he said defensively, and you could have said no. You could have suggested she dance with her husband instead. But you didn't, did you, David? He didn't have an answer for that, so I continued. See, here's the thing about small towns like Fairview Mills. Everyone talks, and right now, everyone's talking about how David Russo from the Audi dealership was all over Jack Mallory's wife at the insurance company Christmas party. It was just dancing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sure it was. Just like what I did with Lisa was just dancing, but somehow I don't think your wife would see it that way. David's face went white. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Tell the truth about what happened? Why would I need to do that? Half the insurance office was there. I'm sure someone's already posted pictures on Facebook. It was a bluff, but it worked. David looked sick, probably realizing for the first time that his behavior had consequences beyond whatever drama he'd thought he was creating between me and Vanessa. This isn't over, he said, trying to salvage some dignity. Yeah, it is, I replied calmly, because if I see you near my wife again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. David looked around the bar, realized he had no support in the room, and walked back to his table. A few minutes later, he and his friends left without finishing their drinks. Eddie refilled my beer without being asked. Feel better? Yeah, actually, I do. Good, because this is just the beginning. Small-town divorce is like a slow-motion car wreck. Everyone watches, everyone takes sides, and it gets uglier before it gets better. I thought about Vanessa, probably sitting at her sister's house right now, planning her next move. About Lisa, who'd answered honestly when I asked if she'd been plotting to break up my marriage. About David, who was probably calling Vanessa right now to tell her about our conversation. Let it get ugly, I said. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. Eddie raised his glass. To not pretending. To not pretending, I agreed, and we drank to the end of my marriage and whatever came next. Sunday morning brought rain and a text message from Emma that made my coffee taste like ash. Dad, saw the Facebook post, WTF happened at Mom's party, call me. I'd been dreading this conversation since Friday night. Emma was a senior at UMass, smart as hell and majoring in psychology. She'd see right through any attempt to sugarcoat what had happened, but I still wasn't sure how to explain that her mother had been grinding against another man while her father watched from across the room. "Hey, sweetheart," I said when she answered on the second ring. "Dad, what the hell? Brittany Morrison's mom posted pictures from the party, and everyone's saying you and Mom had some huge fight and you left with Lisa Chen?" Emma had always been direct. "Got that from me. No point in dancing around it now." "Your mother and I are having some problems, Em. We're probably going to separate for a while." "Because she danced with someone? Dad, that's crazy." "It's more complicated than that, honey. We've been growing apart for a long time. Friday night was just when it all came to a head." There was a long pause, and I could hear her processing this. Emma was 21, old enough to understand that marriages sometimes fell apart, but young enough to still believe her parents would figure it out somehow. "Is it because of Lisa?" she asked finally. "No, baby. Lisa's a friend who was kind to me when I needed kindness. But this is about me and your mother, nobody else." "Mom's crying all the time," Emma said quietly. "Aunt Carol says you changed the locks and won't talk to her." "I haven't changed any locks, but I'm not ready to talk yet either. I need some time to think." "This is so screwed up," Emma said, then immediately apologized for the language. "Yeah, it is. But sometimes things have to get screwed up before they can get better." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen listening to the rain against the windows and wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. 18 years of marriage, a daughter in college, a life we'd built together. Was I really willing to throw all of that away over one dance? But it wasn't one dance, I reminded myself. It was years of feeling invisible, months of Vanessa working late and coming home smelling like wine and other people's cologne. It was birthday dinners where she spent more time on her phone than talking to me. Anniversary gifts that felt like obligations rather than expressions of love. The doorbell rang around noon, and I was surprised to see Lisa standing on my porch with a covered dish and an umbrella. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, "and I figured you probably weren't in the mood to cook." She'd made lasagna, the kind that takes hours to prepare properly, the kind Vanessa used to make when we were first married, before her job became more important than our dinner table. "You didn't have to do this," I said, "but I was grateful for the company. I wanted to. Besides, I had to close the shop today anyway. Nobody's buying vintage clothes in weather like this." We ate lunch together in my kitchen, talking about everything except the elephant in the room. Lisa told me about her business, about the estate sales she haunted looking for unique pieces, about the customers who came in with stories about their grandmother's dresses. She was passionate about her work in a way that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with fixing engines. There was something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. "Can I ask you something?" I said as we were finishing the meal. "Anything." "Carol said you've been interested in me for years. Is that true?" Lisa set down her fork and looked at me directly. "Yes." "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because you were married to my best friend. Because I'm not the kind of person who breaks up marriages. Because I hoped that maybe someday you'd notice me on your own." "I noticed you," I said quietly. "I just didn't think I was allowed to. And now? Now I don't know what I'm allowed to do." Lisa reached across the table and took my hand. "You're allowed to be happy, Jack. You're allowed to be with someone who sees you, who appreciates you. Even if it means hurting Vanessa?" "Vanessa hurt herself when she chose to dance with David instead of her husband. You didn't make that choice for her." We were still holding hands when my phone rang. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen, and Lisa started to pull away, but I held on. "Jack," Vanessa's voice was thick with tears. "Please, we need to talk. I can't stay at Carol's forever." "What do you want to talk about, Vanessa?" "I want to apologize. I want to explain what happened Friday night. I want to save our marriage." I looked at Lisa, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm not sure there's anything left to save." "Don't say that, please. 18 years, Jack. We have a daughter together, a life together. You can't throw that all away over one mistake." "It wasn't one mistake, Vanessa. It was the culmination of years of mistakes. Years of you treating me like I was invisible, like I was something you had to tolerate instead of someone you chose to love." "That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time you touched me without it being perfunctory? When was the last time you looked at me the way you looked at David on Friday night?" The silence stretched between us, and I could hear her crying softly. "I know I haven't been a perfect wife," she said finally, "but I love you, Jack. I've always loved you." "Maybe you do, but you don't like me very much, do you? You don't like what I do for a living, you don't like my friends, you don't like the way I dress or the way I talk or the fact that I don't fit into your professional world. That's not fair, isn't it? How many times have you introduced me to your coworkers as just a mechanic? How many times have you made excuses for why I can't attend some office function because I wouldn't fit in?" Lisa squeezed my hand, and I realized I was saying things I'd been thinking for years, but never had the courage to voice. "I never meant to make you feel that way," Vanessa said. "But you did. And Friday night, when you left your ring at home and danced with David like you were single, you made it clear that you'd rather be with someone like him than someone like me. I was drunk, I was stupid, it didn't mean anything. It meant everything, Vanessa, because it showed me who you really want to be, and it's not someone who's married to me." I could hear her sobbing now, and part of me wanted to comfort her, to take back everything I'd said and pretend Friday night had never happened. But a larger part of me felt relieved to finally speak the truth. "So what now?" she asked. "You're just going to move on with Lisa like I never existed?" "I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I'm not going to keep pretending that we're happy when we're not." After I hung up, Lisa and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," I said without hesitation. "I want you to stay." "Even though it complicates everything?" "Especially because it complicates everything. I'm tired of simple, Lisa. Simple hasn't been working for me." She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her since Friday night. "In that case, I should probably tell you something." "What?" "Carol was right about me plotting to break up your marriage. Not actively, but I've been hoping for years that you'd realize Vanessa didn't deserve you." "And you think you do?" "I think I'd try a hell of a lot harder than she has." I leaned across the table and kissed her, tasting possibility and promise and the sweet destruction of everything I'd thought my life would be. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the last remnants of the man I'd been before Friday night. When we finally broke apart, I realized I was ready to find out who I was going to become. "So what happens now?" Lisa asked. "Now we see how much damage we can do," I said, and meant it. The war for my life was just beginning, and for the first time in years, I was ready to fight. Monday morning brought the first real consequences of my decision to blow up my life in public. I was under the hood of a Ford pickup when my phone started ringing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. By lunch, I'd received 3 calls from lawyers, 2 from reporters at the local paper, and 1 from a woman who claimed to represent a reality TV show about messy divorces. Eddie showed up around noon with sandwiches and a grim expression. "You might want to see this," he said, handing me his phone. The Fairview Mills Facebook community page had exploded over the weekend. Someone had posted pictures from the Christmas party, including one of Vanessa dancing with David and another of me walking out with Lisa. The comments section was a battlefield of opinions, with roughly half the town supporting me and the other half calling me everything from a jealous husband to a predatory homewrecker. But it was the post from David's wife that made my blood run cold. To everyone asking about the pictures from Friday night, my husband David has been having an affair with Vanessa Mallory for months. I found the text messages yesterday. Thank you to whoever posted these photos. At least now I know I'm not crazy. Jesus, I muttered, scrolling through the dozens of comments and shares. It gets worse, Eddie said. Keep reading. 3 posts down, Carol Brennan had responded with a lengthy defense of her sister that painted me as an abusive husband who'd been psychologically tormenting Vanessa for years. According to Carol, I was controlling, jealous, and had deliberately humiliated Vanessa because I couldn't handle her professional success. She's really going nuclear, Eddie observed. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized. Tom Bradley, one of my oldest customers and a guy I'd considered a friend for over a decade. "Jack," he said without preamble, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." "Okay." "Did you really threaten David Russo at Eddie's bar Saturday night?" I closed my eyes, realizing that my confrontation with David had grown in the telling. I told him if I saw him near my wife again, we'd have a different kind of conversation. That's hardly a threat. "That's not what I heard. I heard you threatened to beat the shit out of him if he didn't stay away from Vanessa." "Tom, you've known me for 10 years. Do I seem like the kind of guy who goes around threatening people?" There was a pause. "No, but you also never seemed like the kind of guy who'd abandon his wife at a Christmas party." "I didn't abandon her. I left with a friend after watching my wife dry hump her coworker on the dance floor. Look, Jack, I don't know what really happened, but people are talking, and some of what they're saying, it's not good for business. I think I'm going to take my fleet maintenance to Morrison's garage for a while, until this all blows over." After Tom hung up, I stared at my phone and realized that Carol's campaign to destroy my reputation was working. In a town like Fairview Mills, perception was reality, and the perception she was creating was that I was an unstable man who'd snapped when his wife tried to have a little innocent fun. "How bad is it going to get?" I asked Eddie. "Depends on how far they're willing to take it. Carol's got connections in this town, and she's clearly decided that the best defense is a good offense." My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Seeing the Facebook posts, are you okay? Want me to come over? Before I could respond, another text came in. This one from a number I didn't recognize. Stay away from other people's wives, you psycho. Then another. Vanessa deserves better than a loser mechanic. And another. Hope you're happy destroying your family for some slut. They're really going after Lisa too, I said, showing Eddie the messages. Small-town mob mentality. Give it a week, they'll find something else to be outraged about. But I wasn't sure we had a week. By Tuesday morning, I'd lost 3 more customers, and someone had spray-painted cheater on the side of my garage. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was being called a cheater for leaving my wife after she cheated on me. Lisa came by that evening looking shaken. Someone threw a brick through my shop window today, she said, with a note calling me a home-wrecking whore. Jesus, Lisa, I'm sorry. This is my fault. No, it's not. This is what happens when small-minded people decide to take sides without knowing the facts. We were sitting in my kitchen, trying to figure out our next move, when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see a man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. Mr. Mallory? I'm Richard Steinberg. I represent your wife in her divorce proceedings. I hadn't even filed for divorce yet, but apparently Vanessa was getting ahead of the game. She's requesting that you vacate the marital home immediately, Steinberg continued. She's also seeking a restraining order based on your threatening behavior toward her and her colleagues. What threatening behavior? Your confrontation with Mr. Russo at a local establishment, your refusal to allow your wife to return to her home, your harassment via telephone. I had one conversation with Russo. I never said she couldn't come home, and she called me. Steinberg handed me a thick envelope. You're being served with temporary orders. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises, and you're prohibited from contacting your wife except through counsel. After he left, I sat on my couch holding the papers and trying to process what was happening. In less than a week, I'd gone from being an invisible husband to being painted as a dangerous stalker. They're trying to control the narrative, Lisa said, reading over the documents. Make you look like the aggressor so Vanessa comes out looking like the victim. Maybe I am the aggressor. Maybe I should have just shut up and pretended I didn't see what I saw. No, Lisa said firmly. You did what any self-respecting man would do. You refused to be humiliated. My phone rang, Emma calling from school. Dad, what the hell is going on? Aunt Carol called me and said Mom had to get a restraining order because you threatened her. I never threatened your mother, Em. I told David Russo to stay away from her, but I never threatened Vanessa. But you're getting divorced? This is really happening? I looked at Lisa, who was watching me with concern. Yeah, sweetheart, it's really happening. I'm coming home this weekend. I need to see what's going on for myself. After Emma hung up, I realized that the war for my reputation was about to become a war for my daughter's loyalty as well. Carol and Vanessa were clearly planning to paint me as an unstable man who'd abandoned his family, and Emma was going to be caught in the middle. I need to fight back, I said to Lisa. I can't just let them destroy me without responding. What did you have in mind? I thought about David's wife, about her Facebook post revealing the affair, about the text messages she'd found, the evidence that this hadn't been an innocent dance, but part of a longer betrayal. I think it's time people knew the whole truth about what's been going on. Lisa looked uncertain. Are you sure you want to go down that road? Once you start a public war, it's hard to control where it goes. They started the war when they decided to make me the villain. I'm just going to finish it. That night, I sat down at my computer and began typing a response to Carol's Facebook post. I detailed the months of Vanessa working late, the growing distance between us, the morning she'd forgotten her wedding ring. I described what I'd actually seen at the Christmas party. Not innocent dancing, but a married woman grinding against her lover while her husband watched. I posted screenshots of some of the text messages Vanessa had sent me over the past few months. Cold, dismissive messages that showed how little regard she had for our marriage. And I ended with a simple statement. I didn't abandon my wife. I stopped pretending to be married to someone who'd already checked out of our relationship months ago. The only mistake I made was waiting so long to admit it. Within an hour, the post had dozens of comments and shares. The tide of public opinion began to shift as people realized there were 2 sides to the story, and the side they'd been hearing wasn't complete. But I knew this was only the beginning. Carol and Vanessa wouldn't take this counterattack lying down, and I had no idea how far they were willing to go to destroy me. As I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with one final text of the day, this one from Vanessa herself. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I showed it to Lisa, who was staying over again despite the risk to her reputation. No, she said, reading the message. The biggest mistake of your life was staying married to someone who could send a text like that. She was right. The woman I'd married would never have threatened me, would never have tried to destroy me for refusing to be humiliated. That woman had disappeared somewhere along the way, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and didn't particularly like. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new attempts to paint me as the villain in a story where I was really just a man who'd finally decided to stop being invisible. But tonight, I was going to sleep next to someone who saw me, who valued me, who treated me like I mattered. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. Emma came home Thursday evening, 3 days earlier than she'd planned, and I could see immediately that the week had taken its toll on her too. She looked tired, stressed, older than her 21 years. "Dad," she said, hugging me tightly, "I read your Facebook post, and Mom's response, and Aunt Carol's response to your response. This is insane." Vanessa had indeed responded to my post, with a lengthy rebuttal that painted me as a man who'd become increasingly controlling and paranoid over the past year. According to her version of events, I'd been accusing her of affairs for months, going through her phone, following her to work events, and generally making her life miserable with my jealous suspicions. It was a masterful piece of gaslighting that made me question my own memories of our relationship. Had I been suspicious? Yes, but only because she'd been acting suspiciously. Had I asked questions about her late nights and weekend work events? Yes, but because she'd stopped including me in her life entirely. "Is any of what she wrote true?" Emma asked. "Some of it. I did ask questions when she started working late every night. I did wonder why she suddenly needed to attend so many weekend conferences, but I never followed her anywhere, and I never went through her phone." "But you suspected she was cheating?" I sat down heavily on the couch, feeling every one of my 44 years. "Yeah, baby, I suspected, but I hoped I was wrong." "And you weren't wrong?" "No, I wasn't." Emma was quiet for a long time, processing this. Finally, she spoke again. "Lisa's been here every night this week, hasn't she?" "How did you—" "Her car's been in the driveway. Neighbors talk, Dad, especially when there's drama." I felt a stab of guilt. Emma was dealing with her parents' divorce, and here I was flaunting my new relationship in front of the whole town. "I'm sorry, Em. I know this is all happening fast." "Do you love her?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know. Maybe. It's complicated." "More complicated than being married to someone who doesn't respect you." That stopped me cold. Emma had always been perceptive, but I hadn't realized she'd noticed the dysfunction in our marriage. "You knew things were bad between me and your mother?" "Dad, I'm not blind. You guys barely talked to each other when I was home for Thanksgiving. Mom spent the whole weekend on her phone, and you spent it in the garage. It was like you were roommates, not married people." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Through the window, I could see Vanessa standing on the porch, looking nervous and determined. "She can't be here," Emma said. "The restraining order?" "The restraining order says I can't contact her. It doesn't say she can't contact me." I opened the door, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But there was something different in her eyes now, something calculating that hadn't been there before. "Hello, Jack." "Emma." "Mom," Emma said coolly. I was hoping we could talk, all three of us, like a family. "We're not a family anymore, Vanessa. You made sure of that when you filed for divorce and got a restraining order." I was angry. I was hurt. "You humiliated me in front of everyone I work with. You humiliated yourself when you decided to grind against David Russo like you were trying to get pregnant on the dance floor." Emma made a disgusted sound. "Gross, Dad." Sorry, baby, but it's true." Vanessa stepped into the house without being invited, and I noticed she was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something expensive and professional that probably cost more than I made in a week. "I want to work this out," she said, "for Emma's sake, if not for ours." "There's nothing to work out, Mom," Emma said before I could respond. "You cheated. Dad found out. It's over." "It wasn't cheating," Vanessa said quickly. "It was just dancing." "Bullshit," Emma interrupted. "David's wife posted the text messages on Facebook, Mom. Everyone's seen them. Jack's so boring. You make me feel alive again. I wish I could leave him for you." "That's not just dancing." Vanessa's face went white. "You read those?" "Everyone read those. David's wife made sure of it before she left town with their kids." I hadn't known that David's wife had left. The collateral damage from our little drama was spreading wider than I'd realized. "Those messages were taken out of context," Vanessa said weakly. "What context makes 'I wish I could leave him for you' acceptable?" I asked. Vanessa looked around the room, probably noticing the changes I'd made since she'd been gone. I'd moved some furniture, put up pictures that had been in storage, made the space feel more like mine and less like ours. You've already moved on, she said, and there was genuine hurt in her voice. Lisa's been staying here, hasn't she? That's none of your business anymore. It is if you're flaunting your affair in front of our daughter. My affair? I couldn't help laughing. Vanessa, you were sleeping with David Russo for months while lying to me about working late. I've been honest with Emma about Lisa from the beginning. Don't talk to me like that in front of our daughter. Our daughter is 21 years old, and she's smart enough to see through your bullshit. Aren't you, Em? Emma looked uncomfortable being put in the middle, but she nodded. Mom, I love you, but you screwed up, big time, and now you're trying to make Dad look like the bad guy when he's the one who got cheated on? Vanessa's composure finally cracked, and she started crying. I made a mistake, okay? I was lonely, I was bored, I felt like Jack didn't see me anymore. David made me feel special, made me feel wanted. I saw you, I said quietly. I just wasn't interesting enough for you anymore. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my work? When was the last time you seemed interested in anything I had to say? When was the last time you touched me without it feeling like an obligation? Vanessa didn't have an answer for that because we both knew the truth. Our marriage had been dying a slow death for years, and David Russo had just been the final nail in the coffin. So what now? She asked. You're going to marry Lisa and pretend I never existed? I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I'm not going to keep pretending that we were happy when we weren't. We could be happy again. We could go to counseling, work on our problems. Vanessa, I interrupted, you filed for divorce. You got a restraining order. You tried to have me thrown out of my own house. You don't get to play the reconciliation card now. She looked around the room one more time, her eyes lingering on a photo of Lisa and me that I'd put on the mantel. It had been taken at the Green Lantern a few nights ago, and we were both laughing at something Eddie had said. We looked happy, relaxed, like people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. She'll never love you the way I did, Vanessa said finally. Maybe not, I replied. But she'll never treat me the way you did either. After Vanessa left, Emma and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Are you okay, Dad? Yeah, I think I am. For the first time in a long time. Good. Because watching you guys pretend to be happy was exhausting. That night, after Emma went to bed, Lisa came over and we sat on the back porch drinking beer and watching the stars. The temperature had dropped, and she was wearing one of my old sweatshirts, looking more beautiful than any woman had a right to look in oversized clothing. How did it go with Emma? She asked. Better than I expected. She's handling this whole thing better than either of her parents are. She's a smart kid. She knows who the good guy is in this story. Am I the good guy? Sometimes I wonder if I'm just as selfish as Vanessa, just in a different way. Lisa turned to look at me. Jack, you stayed faithful to a woman who checked out of your marriage months ago. You tried to make it work even when she was treating you like you were invisible. You only left when she humiliated you in public. If that makes you selfish, then I don't understand the word. And what about us? Are we moving too fast? Probably. But I've been waiting for you for 3 years, and life's too short to waste time pretending we don't care about each other. She was right, of course. Life was too short to waste on people who didn't appreciate what they had. I'd spent 18 years trying to be the husband Vanessa wanted, and it had never been enough. Maybe it was time to try being the man Lisa saw when she looked at me. I love you, I said, surprising myself with the words. I love you too, she replied, like it was the most natural thing in the world. We sat there holding hands and planning a future that neither of us had imagined a week ago. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the divorce proceedings, the continued gossip, the process of rebuilding my life from the ground up. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The war for my life was almost over, and I was finally winning. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in Judge Patricia Morrison's courtroom. Vanessa got the house, which I'd stopped thinking of as home anyway, and half of our savings. I got my business, my truck, and my freedom. Emma split her time between us, though she spent most weekends at the apartment I'd rented above Lisa's vintage clothing store. The town had mostly moved on to other scandals by then. David Russo had left Fairview Mills after his wife took him for everything he was worth in their divorce. Word was he'd moved to Boston, where nobody knew about his habit of dancing too close to married women at Christmas parties. Carol Brennan still crossed the street when she saw me coming, but her campaign to destroy my reputation had ultimately backfired when people realized that most of her accusations didn't hold up to scrutiny. I'd never been controlling or abusive, just a man who'd finally gotten tired of being treated like he didn't matter. The real surprise had come 3 months after the divorce, when Vanessa showed up at my shop looking thinner and older than I remembered. I made a mistake, she'd said without preamble. David was never going to leave his wife for me. I threw away 18 years for a fantasy. I know, I'd replied, not unkindly. Is there any chance we could try again? I'd looked at her for a long moment, this woman who'd been the center of my world for so long. She was still beautiful, still the mother of my daughter, still someone I'd once loved more than life itself. No, I'd said finally. There's not. She'd cried then, standing in my garage surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the sound of pneumatic tools. I'd wanted to comfort her, but I'd learned the hard way that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I hope you'll be happy, she'd said as she was leaving. I already am, I'd told her, and meant it. Now, on a Friday evening in June, I was getting ready for the Fairview Mills Summer Festival, where Lisa and I would make our first official public appearance as a couple. We'd been living together for 2 months, and it felt more natural than anything I'd ever done. You ready for this? Lisa asked, adjusting my tie in the mirror. She was wearing a blue dress that brought out her eyes, and I was struck again by how lucky I was to have found someone who actually wanted to be with me. Ready as I'll ever be, though I still think it's funny that we're going to dance in public again. This time, nobody's going to be surprised when we leave together. The festival was in full swing when we arrived, with live music, food trucks, and half the town milling around the park. I spotted Vanessa across the crowd, standing alone near the bandstand, watching the couples on the dance floor with an expression I couldn't quite read. She looks sad, Lisa observed, following my gaze. Yeah, she does. Do you regret it? Any of it? I thought about the question seriously. Did I regret the way our marriage had ended? The public humiliation, the bitter divorce proceedings, the damage to Emma's relationship with her mother? I regret that it had to happen the way it did, I said finally. But I don't regret that it happened. Good answer. Eddie appeared at our table with a beer and a grin. Well, if it isn't Fairview Mills' most famous couple, how does it feel to be the town's biggest success story? Success story? I asked. Hell yes. You dumped a woman who didn't appreciate you and found one who does. That's the American dream right there. Lisa laughed. I like your friend, Jack. He grows on you, like a fungus. We spent the evening dancing, talking with friends, and enjoying the kind of simple pleasures I'd forgotten existed. Lisa was a natural at these kinds of events, charming everyone she met, making me look good just by being with me. Around 10 o'clock, as the evening was winding down, Vanessa approached our table. She looked nervous, uncertain, like she wasn't sure she had the right to interrupt. Jack, could I talk to you for a minute? Lisa squeezed my hand. I'll get us another drink, she said diplomatically. Vanessa sat down across from me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. She was wearing her wedding ring again, I noticed, though we'd been divorced for 3 months. You look happy, she said finally. I am. Good. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. So do you, Vanessa. You'll find someone who's right for you. I had someone who was right for me. I just didn't realize it until it was too late. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Emma's doing well, Vanessa continued. She's excited about graduate school. Yeah, she told me. Psychology, like we always thought she would. She says she wants to specialize in marriage counseling, help couples communicate better. Vanessa smiled sadly. Ironic, isn't it? Maybe she'll be good at it. She's always been able to see through people's bullshit, including ours. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the other couples on the dance floor. The band was playing something slow and romantic, and I found myself thinking about that night 6 months ago when everything had changed. I should have danced with you that night, Vanessa said suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. At the Christmas party. I should have asked my husband to dance instead of throwing myself at David like some desperate teenager. Yeah, you should have. Would it have made a difference, if I had? I considered the question honestly. I don't know, maybe, but probably not in the long run. We'd been growing apart for years, Vanessa. That night was just when it all came to a head. I know. I wish I'd tried harder, been a better wife. You weren't a bad wife. We just weren't good together anymore. Lisa returned with our drinks, and Vanessa stood up to leave. Take care of him, she said to Lisa. He's one of the good ones. I know, Lisa replied. I plan to. After Vanessa walked away, Lisa and I sat watching the last few couples on the dance floor. The evening was winding down, and people were starting to head home. Want to dance? I asked. Always. We walked onto the dance floor together, and I pulled her close as the band played their final song of the evening. She felt perfect in my arms, like she belonged there, like this was how things were always supposed to be. Any regrets? She asked, echoing her question from earlier. I looked around the festival, at the people heading home to their lives and their families and their complicated relationships. I thought about Vanessa, probably driving home alone to the house we'd once shared. I thought about Emma, building her own life and her own understanding of what love should look like. I thought about the man I'd been 6 months ago, invisible and ignored and slowly dying inside. None, I said, and meant it. We danced until the music stopped, until the lights came up, until we were the last couple on the floor. Then we walked hand in hand to my truck, ready to go home to the life we were building together. As we drove through the quiet streets of Fairview Mills, I realized that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find everything you actually needed. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance to dance with someone who actually wants to dance with you. 6 months ago, I'd placed my wife's wedding ring on her chair and walked across a dance floor to ask her best friend to dance. It had been the most terrifying and liberating moment of my life, the moment when I'd finally stopped being invisible and started being seen. Tonight, I was going home with a woman who'd seen me all along, who'd been waiting patiently for me to realize that I deserved better than being someone's second choice. The war for my life was over, and I'd won everything that mattered.